Welcome to the Bros Talking Soccer podcast. My name is Dave Knittel, the oldest Knittel brother, and on this podcast, the only Knittel brother. Welcome to Bros Talking Soccer. I can't remember if I said that before. This is going to be Bro Talking Soccer again. Christian, the middle Knittel, is at a wedding. Matthew is, I don't know what Matt is doing, but he is not here, and so it's just going to be me again. We are part of the Big Heads Media Network, so I wanted to mention that. Big Heads Podcast Network. Go check out bigheadsmedia.com for, I think they have over 40 podcasts at this point about all kinds of different things, so make sure to check them out. Other plug real quick is for stadiumscene.tv. Go to stadiumscene.tv to check out all kinds of awesome podcasts about the sports world, not just specific to soccer. Today, we are recapping World Cup 2019. It is day 2. If you're joining us live on YouTube, hello, interact with me as I go along here, so I'm not a psychopath talking to himself for about an hour. If you are listening to the podcast, I record this right after the last match finishes for every day of the World Cup. Come hang out with me. So again, I'm not a psychopath, just yammering to himself. Let's get right into the matches. Before we do it, I just wanted to mention, send me feedback. Do people like the way that I'm doing it here? I kind of give my thoughts on what happened, what I expected to happen before the match kicks off. Then I kind of recap the events, a little bit of tactics as the match happens in the first half, then second half. And so if you want me to talk about anything specifically or focus on anything, feedback is very much encouraged at BT Soccer Pod, or send an email, bros.talking.soccer@gmail.com. Let's get into it. First match of the day, we had Germany taking on China. Germany prevailed in this one 1-0. Now, Germany was coming out in a 4-5-1. China was going to be in a 4-4-2. I had my eye on Marutzen, the German center midfielder / striker, and so I was just expecting a lot from her. I know that she's only made a couple of appearances in previous World Cups, and she had, a lot of buzz about her, so I was going to be looking out for her. The broadcast noted that Germany has never lost an opening match in a World Cup, and they've never lost a match to an Asian country at the women's level either, and so those were things to keep an eye on, and so I wanted to mention them. Fox pregame coverage, I thought that they were pretty harsh on Germany, and I don't know if they were just poking fun at Anga Herst. I can't remember the broadcaster's name who's been on the broadcast for Fox, and she was German, but they were really just kind of harping on the fact that Anga mentioned that they played on artificial turf in the last World Cup, and she was kind of blaming that. I just thought that was a little bit odd that they were focusing so much on that, because it ultimately doesn't matter for this World Cup. China came out, they started aggressive. Now, yesterday we saw France have just so much time and to do whatever they wanted from South Korea, because South Korea was so worried about France's attack. I didn't know if that was the same thing was going to happen here. It did not. China was exceptionally aggressive. They were pressing right off the start. They were really compact. They were compressing the field, and so they weren't spread out in any way, either defensively or really offensively, and just making it tough. And they were also very physical throughout the match. They picked up a number of yellow cards, and I thought, we're fortunate not even to see more. Germany, though they were in a 4-5-1, I thought that they kind of came into a 3-4-3 as they were building out of the back. Germany was also pressing. So again, this matchup was very different than the first match yesterday, where France basically dominated and South Korea just couldn't get a foothold. Both of these sides were pressing, and it was a little bit more back and forth, which was good to see. Huth, the outside winger, so I think she started on the left. She was switching back and forth throughout the match, but she showed a ton of pace early. Germany was very good at spacing in possession. So when they had the ball, they were doing a good job of just spreading out the field and giving themselves options, and China wasn't quite doing that as much. First minute that I noted something was in the 14th. It was a terrible giveaway by China. They kind of dwelled on the ball for a while, and then Huth had a shot blocked. No, I'm sorry. It was a terrible giveaway by Germany. I'm reading notes here, and a lot has happened, so my apologies. Sometimes this is going to happen, people, but bear with me here. So Germany had the terrible giveaway, and then this was China's first chance. And so China had Li Yang, who had the shot blocked, and she just took too long on the ball. So Yashi Gu intercepted the ball. I'm going to try to get these names right. And then she played it to Shashan Wang, number 11. Apologies here on the pronunciations. And she put it then back to Gu, who drove in, and she just kind of dwelled a little bit too long on the ball. And then number 9, again, just took a touch and ultimately played it wide. They needed to be more ruthless there. And so that was a huge missed opportunity for China. And that all came about by the center back Dorsun, who had a pretty poor first half for Germany, playing a poor pass across, and that's what led to that breakaway. So I wanted to note that was the first kind of incident. I thought Germany was targeting most of their attacks through the first half, or at least through the first 15 minutes, through the left side of the pitch, and that was through Huth. I thought that they needed to do a better job of switching the play quickly, because China, again, like I was talking about earlier, was just compressing all that space, and there was opportunities if they could switch play more quickly. 17th minute, Simone hits the bar, and that was after a short corner. This is going to be a theme all day, or what looks like all World Cup. It's just, did every team get together and say, hey, let's not defend, or let's just hand tie ourselves, tie one hand behind our back when defending short corners? Because again, this was a simple situation where China they only sent one person out to guard two players taking a short corner. And so Simone had a fairly open cross and it hit the bar. It was a fairly lucky. She wasn't trying to do that, but hit the bar there, but China lucky not to go behind there. And then the 20th minute, Simone had another cross. This came from the opposite side of the field, back when she was in her normal position. Pop gets ahead to it, and it just goes right over the bar. But Pop took a knock to her ankle here, and that was a theme throughout. She was getting just beat up physically by China throughout the match. And again, it was rough on Germany, but that was kind of their last good chance of the first half. And then kind of from then on, China didn't give too much, and China looked the better side, especially to close out the half. China, they were very direct when they had the ball. They weren't possessing whatsoever to relieve any of that pressure. And so Germany would get the ball back relatively quickly and come back at China, but China was doing a pretty good job of maintaining their defensive shape. But it was just, they probably could have used a little bit more possessing to just relieve themselves to a certain extent. That doesn't sound right, but to relieve the pressure. That's a better way of saying that on that stuff. China, I was worried about them. They were pressing throughout the half, but I didn't know if it was the smartest pressing. It was like when the ball would go back to the goalkeeper, they would just send a runner out there. And so I didn't know if this was going to impact them later on in the match, where they would just run out of steam. And it didn't really happen. But again, I wanted to note it because I think they could have been smarter with their pressing. The most effective pressing systems aren't just constant press. What it is you're directing somebody into a situation where then you have a numerical advantage, and then everybody kind of pounces and swarms. I thought China was more or less just pressing to press for a lot of the half, or really throughout the game. And so that was something that I worried about them tiring. Again, didn't really play out that way, but something I kept an eye on, something to look for in future matches. Germany, I thought they looked very static in the attacking third. Everyone was kind of waiting for crosses, and maybe you had one or two players making movements or out wide that, we had a fullback and a winger kind of combining. There really wasn't a ton of center midfield play supporting them. And then you had everybody else kind of in the box, no real intricate movements. And that was something that was disappointing from a German front. I thought Maratsan kept floating to the left and Huth was cutting in on the right. That happened throughout the match. 33rd minute, we had a sub for China. It looked like Liu picked up an injury, and then Tan came on again. But right before that, the broadcast didn't note this, but on a number of occasions, Germany throughout the match was having players switch positions and switch tactics and things like that. So in the 30th minute, Huth and Gavin, the other outside, whatever you want to call her, outside back or outside midfielder or wing, switch flanks. And again, that happened a couple of times. And by the end of the match, Gavin was playing left fullback. Again, the broadcast didn't note that, but that was something interesting to watch. For a very short amount of time after that switch happened, Maratsan dropped deeper. De Brits ended up at center forward. And again, this was something else we saw later, and I'll touch on it in the second half. The Brits ended up playing left wing. And again, players were very fluid throughout the match and just popping up in different positions. 44th minute, again, well, I guess 38th minute. I wanted to note this. There was an injury to a German player, and Germany played it out, and then China just didn't give the ball back. I didn't know what the heck happened. I didn't know if it was a miscommunication or if they legitimately meant to do that. They were playing, again, a very aggressive style and kind of antagonist. And so I didn't know if that was just a miscommunication or if they legitimately were trying to do that to kind of get under Germany's skin. But that was kind of unsporting behavior and definitely something that needed to be called out. 44th minute, China had a good bit of press, and that forced a turnover. They had a good counter, and there was a lovely kind of through ball slipped in, but Yang Li hit the post. This was the best chance of the half. She should have finished here. She was more composed than, I guess, the chance earlier where she took too many touches and ended up putting it wide. But that was more or less China's best moment of the half. Zhang Rui hit the through ball to her. So that was somebody else that I wanted to highlight. And then another chance for China came in the 47th minute. So first half stoppage time. China more or less better side to the first half. Already touched on Dorsun having some bad giveaways for Germany. Deep breath. That is the end of the first half. All right, let's keep this thing rolling here. The second half starts. Germany has a sub. So this is where the formation gets all kinds of wacky. And again, the broadcast didn't touch on this, and it was kind of frustrating because it took me a while to figure out what the heck happened. But Germany subbed on Oberdorf for Simone. Simone had picked up, I think, a couple knocks in the first half, and she was playing left back. So what they did was they then moved Hergering, who was the center back, to center midfield. They pushed Dabritz up to left wing, and then they dropped Gavin to left back. And so this was all just really interesting to me because Gavin looked to be right-footed. I mean, she scores the goal and she's right-footed. And again, I think the broadcast could have done a better job of calling out all these formational switches and positional switches because it had an impact on the match. And so again, it was an interesting sub because number one, you don't like to sub center backs, generally speaking, in most matches. And then to sub a center back, or I guess to sub an outside back and then change around your formation was just it was a bold decision by Germany. And so something that I think deserved more attention on the broadcast. China also brought in a sub at half. Wang Zhuang came on for Wei Yao, and she came on at right midfield. Now, 60th minute is the next minute where we had something kind of noteworthy happen, and that was when Huth and Gavin kind of swapped back, or I guess it was Dabritz at that point, but you know, there was some movement there. 63rd, Magul comes on for Leopolds at center midfield. And throughout this time, China is just being very frustrating towards Germany, and Germany can't get a legit chance throughout this. And yeah, this was where I kind of noted what the heck was going on with the formation. So again, lots of changes. I thought Magul was really interesting for Germany. She was more attacking minded than Leopolds, who was kind of that center midfielder that was dropping back into the center backs and building out as Germany was playing that 3-4-3. Magul was much more attacking oriented, much higher up the pitch in her positioning. 66th minute, that's where the goal comes from. It's a corner kick. The ball pops loose at the top of the box to Gavin. She has a great first touch to settle, and she doesn't need to take a settling touch. She doesn't need to get her feet right. Perfect touch. Second shot is a hit. It, fortunate to get through some bodies, but it was excellent that she had her first touch to set her up so well, and then a thunderous strike into the corner, and that was the game-winning goal. 69th minute, there was a sub. Sang Duan came on for Yang Li and moved Wang Shuang up top, and that was Wang Shuang was the person who came on at halftime. Apologies for these pronunciations. I know that they're absolutely god-awful, but I'm doing my best here. 72nd minute, there was a crossfield ball by Maratsan to Dabritz. This is what I was talking about earlier, where there wasn't enough of this from Germany throughout the match because it happened. Dabritz, ultimately, it didn't amount to anything, but you could just see that it really unsettled and unbalanced the Chinese defense. And I expected Germany, or I wanted Germany to be doing more of that. One thing I did note, I really liked Dabritz's game. She was very casual, very cool and calm on the ball. She had 2 or 3 of these moves where she had the ball on her left foot and she went to go play the pass and she just dragged it and kind of rolled it over with her foot and just completely wrong-footed the defender. It's always fun to see. So I wanted to call her out for that. Excellent skill there. 81st minute, that is the Oberdorf foul, and that led to China's best chances in the second half. That was where there was a little bit of chaos, and the shot ends up going over the bar, but that was kind of China's best opportunity of the second half. 85th minute, sub Huth comes off, Schüller comes on. Germany closed it out pretty well from then on. And at the World Cup, ultimately, it's about results. Not every game is going to be pretty. It's not always going to be the best, best soccer. And especially, we saw from the U.S. at last World Cup, they really didn't play well, and then they grew into the tournament. And you want to be playing your best kind of towards the end of the World Cup. And so, Germany, they got the result that they needed. They got a win. They got 3 points, and they're moving on. Props to China, though. I will say that they were exceptionally physical, and picking up that many yellow cards may have ramifications for them as the tournament goes on if they are to potentially get out of the group. That is the end of the first game. Let us know your thoughts. Again, at PT Soccer Pod, or if you're watching on YouTube, hit me up. Let me know what you thought of the match. Next match, we're talking about Spain versus South Africa. And so this one, anyone who has watched these or, followed me over the past week or two knows that I have been drumming up Spain and saying I expect big things from them from this tournament. So I had a somewhat vested interest, rooting interest in this match, and I was very upset, yelling at my TV, very palm sweaty, very nervous after that first half performance because there was so much that was frustrating about the Spain performance. So I'm saying all that up front, but let me give you my expectations even before that. So started off, expected tiki-taka from Spain. We definitely saw that, probably too much in the match, but I expected technical proficiency. I expected to see a lot of Hermoso, the center forward for Spain. And this is all before the match, and I'll get to I'll elaborate on some of these things. Also, Spain was, the broadcast had a 4-5-1. I didn't know if it was going to be a 4-3-3. It definitely was more of a 4-5-1, with that one being Hermoso, and she was definitely more of a false nine and dropping kind of all over the pitch. She had a lot of freedom. South Africa, meanwhile, was more in a typical 4-4-2. I expected to see possession for Spain versus the counterattack for South Africa. That all played out in the match. The last thing I noted before the game kicked off, when they were doing that shot of the team where the camera pans across them as they're singing the anthem, I did notice that South Africa was much, much shorter than Spain, and I didn't know if that was going to make an impact on set pieces. Turns out it didn't, but I thought that was something that might play out as the match went on, but that was more because of Spain's lack of execution on set pieces, in my opinion. So half starts, South Africa set their line of confrontation kind of around midfield to start. And then as the match progressed, they pushed up, a little bit higher, even as they had the lead. But, they were kind of setting their line of pressure right around when Spain was getting towards midfield. Spain, meanwhile, was pressing much higher and, wanting to turn the ball over a lot more. I think the stats ended up, I'm pulling up the stats on my phone here. Spain ended up with 73% possession. And that wasn't like once they got up, they were just holding the ball. That was pretty much the stat throughout the match. Thought Spain looked very comfortable trying to play the ball through the middle, and I thought it was too comfortable. I thought that they were trying to walk it in, and they were just trying to do too much, and they just had too many bodies in there. And the other thing is that they kept pinching the wingers in on the opposite side of the field, and they just didn't have width. It's okay if you want to play that way, but what you're doing is you're just compressing your margin of error, and you're making it a lot smaller where, if you don't have as much space, you have smaller windows to play the ball through. And Spain did a good job of possessing through the middle of the park and even to a certain extent into the attacking third. But when your wingers or your outside backs don't stay wide to at least make the defense think about having to stay wide, you're, again, making your window smaller to play the ball through. And so, again, it was a tactical decision that I didn't necessarily agree with. And Spain made the adjustments at halftime. But again, I wanted to highlight that there, and we'll talk about that in a minute, the adjustments that they made kind of for the second half. I noted again, short corner defending. South Africa was just allowing Spain just additional numbers. And it was frustrating throughout the day to watch teams to just not be aware or just not be educated to know that, okay, it's a 2-on-1 situation. We need to go support that person. So that was frustrating. I thought Spain had a lot of interchanging up top, but it wasn't enough, and it wasn't creative enough is what I'll say. I thought Spain was just overall very, very predictable in a lot of their possession through, 65, 70 minutes. I did thought Caldente looked really dangerous on the wing for Spain. Caldente, it kind of sounds like al dente. So that's how I remembered it throughout the match. 17th minute, South Africa, they started to possess at least a little bit better. Again, the possession numbers were very much in favor of Spain, but I thought that South Africa did a really interesting job of at least holding the ball better than I expected. This wasn't like, oh, let's just boot it long, kind of like to a certain extent we saw a little bit with Nigeria in the last game. Or I guess South Africa is a better example, or South Korea is a better example, where they were just booting it and they just couldn't possess at all. though South Africa didn't have a ton of opportunities to possess the ball, when they did have some chances in the first half, I thought that they did an okay job of relieving that pressure. And so I wanted to give them props for that. Spain, again, yeah, this is where I noted the opposite flank wasn't staying wide. I thought Hermosa had the freedom to drift, already mentioned that. 25th minute, this is where the South Africa goal comes. And this is a really interesting play because it's a South Africa counter that basically Spain got numbers back for and then completely switched off. And so the play happens. Let me get up. I want to make sure I get names here. So play happens where floated out to the side by Ketlana for South Africa, and she was their most dangerous player. She, I think they said, was either South African or African player of the year. She was very talented throughout the match, very good on the ball. And so, she ultimately sticks the shot upper 90, but it basically came after on a South Africa counter, and then Spain gets 6 players back, and then they just let off. The defender who was guarding her, who I think was the right back, and that would have been Terrion or Paredes, got back, and then just because Spain ended up getting 6 players back against South Africa's 3, I think that they just mentally switched off and they were like, okay, we're back. It's almost a situation where nobody takes responsibility because there's so many people around. You sometimes see this in 2-on-1 or 1v2 situations where a dribbler has the ball and they're able to get through 2 defenders where you think the odds are kind of in the defender's favor. Sometimes it can work against defenders because they don't get their angles right and they think that the other one is covering a certain thing. And so I think that there was a certain extent of that here. I'm going to say certain as many times as I want here. Sometimes I get in my head and I just say a same word over again. And I'm just realizing that I'm saying certain way too much. Yeah, and so Thembi Kgatlana, again, just puts it upper 90. I think the goalkeeper may have been a bit aggrieved. The ball was floated a bit, and the goalkeeper does get her hand to it, but isn't able to keep it out. Panos gets her hand to it, but isn't able to keep it out. Spain, again, throughout the first half, I thought that they were trying to just walk the ball in or send in across. Those were their 2 main points of attack. I thought that they needed to at least try to have a shot from distance to sort of make South Africa think and draw them out a little bit more. Caldente, she switched flanks in the first half with San Pedro and about halfway through the half. And, pretty much I thought a lot of the attacks, even with that switch, it wasn't like Spain was trying to get the ball to Caldente. I thought that they still focused on getting the ball down the left side of the pitch. I don't know if that was mainly driven by Leon, the left center back for Spain. She seemed to be a little bit better on the ball, and I don't know if that was just Spain wanted to get her the ball and then they would just naturally progress up that side of the pitch. And so mainly that was that. The last thing, and I put some exclamation points here, I was very frustrated at Spain not having any semblance of a counter in the first half. When they would turn the ball over on the handful of chances that South Africa came forward and they had a chance to counter, Spain opted to just possess, let South Africa get back into play, and then they would be like, okay, now we can attack. Now that you're back in formation and stable and in your positions, all right, now we can attack. And that was something that, again, I was frustrated because I had a lot of high hopes for Spain. 43rd minute, this was another one, tearing my hair out. 45th minute plus 3 minutes of stoppage time. So 48th minute, but it's technically the first half. They had multiple chances to shoot, but nobody's pulling the trigger in the box. They're trying to dribble it into the back of the net. And I was just very frustrated, yelling at my TV. Anyone who followed us on Twitter knows I was pretty upset, tweeted at halftime, that Tyra Banks gif of, her screaming that I was rooting for you because Spain was making me a little bit nervous because I have them going pretty far in this tournament. But redemption. So first half ends, second half starts, and the manager for Spain makes 2 good subs. At least the one really stands out. And so the one that really stands out was Garcia for San Pedro. Not that San Pedro had a bad first half, but Garcia had such an impact as an outside midfielder. And then Bonmati came on for Losada in the center of the park. And so what Garcia did was she stayed wide. Like I was complaining about in the first half, she gave Spain some space to get into and to attack. And then the final sub, which I'll mention later in this podcast, really unlocked Hermoso because what Spain had was Hermoso was drifting everywhere on the pitch, and they didn't have an outlet at center forward. And so, as talented as Hermoso was, and as good as it was to get her the ball, they then didn't have anybody at center forward. I think that they should have played the Garcia. So another Garcia came on later in the match, and she played center forward like a traditional center forward, and that really unlocked Spain's attack. And so, moving forward, I want to see Spain operate with that approach. And so that's what I'll be looking out for. And I'll also be looking to the other Garcia to start wide. Getting back into the match, 47th minute, Hermoso hits the crossbar. It was a really nice save by the goalkeeper. And the ball pops out. And I think it's Caldente is there. She tries to settle it and then ultimately hits a very weak shot. They needed to have urgency. They played this whole match. And again, I was very frustrated. With no urgency, they played it with way too much patience. It wasn't like a good kind of patience where it was like confident and composed. It was more the patience where they just look slow and not urgent. And that's not what you want to see in tournament play, especially like group stages. You want to get through, you want to start off well. And so this was pretty indicative of that, where you're 4 yards out, just get any part of your body on the ball and direct it towards goal with a little bit of pace. And you have an easy goal. And Caldente, she's trying to settle it within the 6-yard box, just shoot it. And yeah, I noted need to shoot first time. Again, there were other chances where Spain they're taking a number of touches. They just needed to hit the ball. 52nd minute. That's when South Africa makes their first sub. Ndameni comes on from Motihalu at right mid. And then Sepo Senwe comes on for Matandi at left mid. Apologies on these pronunciations, but I'm really trying my hardest. But that happens in the 56th. Then the 57th minute, South Africa has a counter off of a bad turnover by Spain, and Ketlana couldn't finish. And that was kind of really tough because that was not their last good chance. But then shortly after that, Spain gets their goal, and from then on, it was kind of all Spain. But 68th minute, Hermoso has her shot blocked by the hand of Van Wyk, who is the captain of South Africa. I know they highlighted she's been playing professional for 14 years. This is her first time making a World Cup, and it's a tough kind of debut for her. I don't have any complaints about the call. No arguments from me. I think it was a handball. I know, people are complaining, where is she supposed to put her hands? But at the end of the day, her hands kind of outstretched and the ball hits it as Hermoso is shooting. I'm fine with the call. The yellow card, I think, is somewhat questionable. I don't know if you have to give it there. Again, it wasn't exceptionally intentional from my perspective. Exceptionally intentional. That's not just intentional. Wasn't exceptionally intentional. Hermoso ultimately converts the penalty. I thought that it was an okay penalty, but it kind of has ramifications for the next penalty that we'll touch on. So that's a little foreshadowing for you. But what happened was the goalkeeper for South Africa dove really early on the penalty, and her name was Dlamini. And so she dove really early. And so it was a fairly easy penalty for Hermoso because she just tucked it into the other side. And I think it wasn't, again, very far. And so I think that played in the goalkeeper's mind. And then we'll touch on that kind of with the next penalty. But 74th minute, Spain scores, but it's ultimately called offside. That was kind of foreshadowing. This is when Spain started to really kind of get things going. Garcia came on for Putellas at center forward. And again, that is the sub that really unlocks Spain's attack, because like I mentioned before, Hermoso then could float wherever, and Spain still had a presence at center forward and occupied the center backs, and it drew people out. And so that was a really good sub from Spain. I also thought Spain was doing a much better job defensively of defending the transitions and the counters from South Africa in the second half. 74th minute, that's where the goal is called back. 77th minute, Smeda comes on for Fulu Tudilu at forward for South Africa. Shortly after that, 82nd minute, this is where Vilakazi, the outside back for South Africa, gets her second yellow, and this is the second penalty call. So this is the most, I think, controversial call of the match, potentially the most controversial call of the World Cup so far. So Vilakazi has the ball. She's defending. She's sort of falling back inside of her own box, and she clears the ball with her left foot. And obviously, when you kick the ball, your foot kind of continues upwards. Nobody just kicks and stops. It's a natural motion for you to continue to have your foot up. But as she's kind of falling backwards and kicking up, Garcia is running to try to close down the ball, and Vilakazi kicks her kind of in the groin, in the upper thigh area, and nothing was called. It kind of, Garcia goes down in the moment, but not too much was made of it. And then VAR comes and gets involved. And so on the replay, it looks very bad. And I know the Fox broadcast was going back and forth. I know Rob Stone and Hinkst were claiming that it wasn't a penalty. I know Alexi Lalas and I think Heather O'Reilly were claiming it definitely was a penalty. For me, reading the situation, and Vilakazi had a couple moments earlier in the match where she was overly physical, and I think that there was a bit more intent here. As a soccer player, sometimes you can do things and make it look like it was an accident when actually, you leave a foot in or you follow through maybe more than you should have. And so if this was another player who maybe hadn't done things earlier in the match, I would have been okay with a no call, but I am ultimately in agreement with the penalty call here. Again, it's really touch and go for me, and I could see it either way. But because of Vilakazi and some of the things she did earlier in the match, I think that it was a penalty, and there was intent here. And she gets a second yellow. She gives up a penalty, and then Hermoso converts. And then this is what I was kind of touching on and foreshadowing earlier a couple minutes ago. Hermoso, this time, previous penalty, she went to her left side, goalkeeper's right. This time she goes to the goalkeeper's left, her right. I don't know why I reversed them. And she tucks it a little bit more into the corner. But it isn't hit with a ton of pace, and it isn't very into the corner. What happens, though, is the goalkeeper, I think, thinks more and recognizes that, okay, last time she didn't hit the greatest penalty. If I wait and react to her after she shoots, I might be able to save this. And in this instance, I think the goalkeeper waits a little bit too long. So whereas the first one, the goalkeeper went a little bit too early, this one she waits maybe a little bit too long, and Hermoso is able to convert. But I thought that it was an interesting dynamic to kind of have happen. And, that ultimately ends up with the game-winning goal there. And then 89th minute, Garcia, who was the player who came on at halftime. So that Garcia, who I thought really unlocked the South Africa defense just by staying more wide, she gets her goal. And so what happened here is the ball is won by Spain, and it's dropped back to a midfielder. And then Garcia makes a really intelligent run where she pulls behind the left back, who is a replacement left back at this point because Vilakazi has been red carded, and I don't think they made a sub. And so this is not the normal left back. And so she goes behind her. And so the defender loses sight of Garcia. And then what she does is she runs across her face and stays on side. And so the left back is way deeper than the other center back. So she's keeping Garcia online. And also by running across her face, it's just by losing her first and then running across her face, it was just an incredibly intelligent run by Garcia. She ultimately rounds the keeper, stays on her feet, and finishes it off. So that was a fantastic goal, and Garcia had a great performance. I think they said she was 21. She's only had a handful of caps and was a part of that U20 squad for Spain that did really well recently. And so exciting to see her, and I'm excited about her future. Last thing I wanted to note was that it was really smart of Fox. I wanted to give them props here. After the red card, this is just like a little, this weird note. They had a red card symbol that South Africa was playing with 10 men, and it was very tiny, and it kind of clashed with the South African flag colors. It wasn't very apparent. And then I just kind of noted it, and then the broadcast, I guess, recognized it, and they ultimately put a yellow text box under South Africa that said South Africa is playing with 10 men. So, for all the flack Fox gets, rightfully so, for a lot of their issues, I want to give them props because they got that graphic fix correct. And ultimately, I was happy that my Spain prediction, didn't look incredibly foolish by them dropping their first match. And I thought that it showed a lot of great character for them to bounce back. And similar to what I was saying about Germany, so World Cup, results are all that matter. And, performance, obviously you want to play well and dominate your opponents and, have the performance that France had, but that's not going to happen. And you don't need to. You just need to get the results and just keep progressing in tournament play. And Spain did that. And so, again, I'm a little bit more relieved about my bold prediction with them. Last match we're talking about here is Norway versus Nigeria. That was the third match that happened today, and Norway just more or less dominated them in all facets of the game once they got up a goal. And so it ended up 3-0 to Norway. Before the match, Norway was in a 4-4-2 and Nigeria was in a 4-3-3, but defending Nigeria's 4-3-3 became more of a 4-4-2. I wanted to mention the Ada Hegerberg situation. We've talked about it on previous podcasts, but in case maybe this is your first time listening, Ada Hegerberg is the Ballon d'Or winner. She's 23 years old, widely recognized as one of, if not the greatest player in the world, but she hasn't played for Norway since 2017. She is protesting kind of women's rights and equality in the sport. But something that I have kind of been frustrated with her about is that it's not very clear what she wants to happen. And so through her protest, the Norwegian FA has given equal pay and equal treatment to the men's and women's teams, at least in their eyes. That's what they say. And we still don't know. And I'm happy Fox kind of called this out. And this is something that I've kind of been highlighting. She hasn't said what's it going to take to get her back out. And so I would love, because she's one of the most talented players in the world, I would love for her to be here. It's just a little frustrating that I don't know what she wants to have happen. And, her claim is that she doesn't want to make her issues publicly known because it would distract from the team. But her situation is distracting from the team one way or another. And I'm completely in agreement that women's soccer and their rights need to be treated the exact same way as men. And, the World Cup is a fantastic way to get your word out and your message out and your, platform. But I just wish that there was a little bit more concrete and a little bit more kind of thought out execution of this protest. And so again, I just wanted to highlight that and just mention that. Last thing I wanted to mention from the pregame is that Fox was really hyping up Oshoala, the center outside. I think she was left wing for Nigeria, and I think she also plays for Barcelona. Yeah, they were saying she played for Barcelona. So she was getting a lot of hype pregame, and she was someone who I was keeping an eye out for. So that was what I thought. Pregame match kicks off, and it was really good because this was the first match, I think, of the World Cup so far where it was a legit kind of battle between two somewhat equal teams, at least through the first few minutes. And I was excited to see that both teams were kind of pressing. Both teams had periods of dangerous play. And so the 5th minute, that was the first thing that I noted. Nigeria had a corner and they floated it into the box, a crowded 6-yard box. And the Norwegian goalkeeper, Helmseth, there it is. Helmseth, who is 39 years old, tons of experience, does a fantastic job of actually collecting the ball. So she catches it. She doesn't punch it. She just catches the ball. Danger's over. And so that was something that I thought was really good for her to see. I thought Nigeria were the more dangerous side early on. They did a good job of switching the attack and were really going after we're really going down Ortega's side of the pitch, so the right side of the pitch, and they were just very direct. When there was a turnover by Norway, again, boom, they were out and going down the wing, and Ortega was really dangerous in 1v1 situations. Norway, they played it short out of the back. This didn't happen a ton on goal kicks, but they did it that one time, and it's just a weird rule, and it's not always going to get me, but for the foreseeable future, it's always going to be something weird and funky for me to see. The center back touched it inside the penalty box. And so that's that weird new FIFA rule where, the defending team can touch it inside the 6-yard box. And so I just wanted to highlight that there. Graham Hansen, I thought, was the best player on the pitch throughout the game. She was incredibly tricky in 1v1 situations or just running at defenders, not even necessarily 1v1, but when she got space in midfield, she was beating players, and then she was really good at kind of slipping in these through balls. And so fantastic play by Graham Hansen throughout the match. She didn't have like breakaway speed, but she had just those quick touches and just could, just kind of shift her hips and just be around defenders and just knew when to take kind of big touches, knew when to take little touches and just beat defenders. And she was fantastic throughout. 13th minute, yellow to Aparanozi, the center forward for Nigeria. And I thought that was a bit harsh. So this was a situation where two players were running for the ball, and she kind of did the thing where most players do, where you stick your arms out. And as she stuck her arm out, the Norwegian defender kind of came running through, and she clipped her in the face. I thought 13th minute, first World Cup match, it didn't seem like a ton of intent. I would have been fine with no yellow there, and I thought that was a little bit harsh, especially because, World Cup tournament play, you have to go 5 matches, I think, without getting a second yellow. And so that was a little bit harsh for me. 17th minute, there was that short corner, and this is it's a tournament of short corners so far, and just teams not being able to defend short corners. But this is another one where 17th minute, Brighton plays to Graham Hansen, and there's only one Nigerian defender. So Nigeria was defending in a zonal formation. They weren't man to man, and so I'm sure every player had a specific zone that they were supposed to be in. But yeah, they just left the one person out to defend two people in a short corner, and they paid the price for it. And so Brighton plays it into Graham Hansen, and Graham Hansen just very easily beats that one defender. She drives to the end line, and then she just cuts it back to Brighton, who hits it and takes a fortunate deflection off a player, but it goes into the net. And ultimately, it's Nigeria's kind of own doing there, where they just didn't send enough players to defend. No defending on short corners. Yeah, that's what I noted there. Ordega, again, I mentioned this throughout. She was easily beating players in 1v1 situations through the first 20, 25 minutes, and really throughout the match. The one thing that really let her down, and this was a theme for Nigeria throughout, their final product, their crosses were just abysmal. It was not very good throughout the game, and they were getting into somewhat dangerous situations, and with better crossing or better kind of final product, they could have made some noise in this match, especially early on, but just did not. I thought that Norway, this is another thing that referees throughout this tournament have done a relatively good job, but this was the first match of the tournament where I kind of noted that the referee was letting Norway get away with a little bit more. And so Norway was doing these little things where they would have subtle contact. They would have these little fouls, and the referee wasn't calling it. And you could see that Nigeria was frustrated, and they have every right to be. And then I think as the game went on, Nigeria saw that Norway was getting away with stuff and then kind of took it up a level. This is how games escalate, and referees need to do a better job of managing maybe physical play. And so Nigeria was, again, being very physical, but because Norway got away with it, and then, but we're getting fouls called. And so it looked like it may have been refereed, favorably towards Norway. And that was because kind of the referee was letting them get away with stuff early. And that was something that I wanted to note. Nigerian goalkeeper Oluwi had 3 or 4 clearances within the first 30 minutes with her feet. So she was very aggressive coming off her line. And that was something that kind of continued throughout the match. 82nd, yep, we're just jumping ahead. 32nd minute, Oshuola had the pace. This was the first time I think we really saw her pace, and she just absolutely torched Tori's daughter at center back for Norway. She just blew right by her. And then again, I think this was either cut out or this was another one where the final product, it didn't amount to anything, but this was one where we really saw, oh wow, Oshuola's just got a whole other gear that other players don't have. 34th minute, this is when Norway takes a 2-0 lead. It comes from 2 breakdowns by Nigeria, and Utland ultimately just scores an absolute rocket by her. But the first Nigerian breakdown happens when the Nigerian defender or player tries to play the ball unnecessarily over the top when didn't need to happen. She wasn't really being pressured by a Norwegian defender, or, this was in Nigeria's own defensive half. And so she wasn't under a lot of pressure. She didn't have to knock it long. And she takes this unnecessary long pass, risky pass, doesn't really execute on it, hits it way too low, and it's easily cut out by Norway. The ball comes back. It's floated into the Nigerian box, and Nigeria does a good job of clearing it. But the center midfielder for Nigeria, and I didn't write the names down of the players who made the mistakes for Nigeria, but she kind of waits on the ball. And anyone who's played soccer knows that you need to come back to the ball. You can't wait for it to get to you. And Raiten just steps right in front of her, just easily gets around her, slips it into Utland, who then just fires it in off the underside of the crossbar. But it all comes about from Nigeria's kind of own doing, as does, the third goal, which we'll talk about right now. So 37th minute, this is with the own goal by Ohale. And in this one, there are 3 mistakes from Nigeria that directly contribute to this. So first off, the goalkeeper completely mishits the goal kick. So she didn't have the strongest foot, and you kind of saw that throughout the match. But this one didn't have any height. So this one just went really low, and it was kind of driven right at the center back, Abe. So AB, I'm going to go with AB. AB then doesn't do anything proactive, or at least positive from a Nigeria perspective. She ends up taking a touch back towards her own goal, pretty much playing a perfect through ball to the Norwegian player through into the corner. And so that was the second mistake. And then the third mistake, which again is probably harsh on Ohale, but she's trying to get back and recover. And so she uses her foot and ultimately gets it into her own net. But I guess really, I would say 2.5 mistakes here because Ohale is just trying to get a touch on it. And really, this goal comes about because of the goalkeeper's terrible goal kick and then the center back's terrible touch that just gifts Norway the chance. And then from then on out, I mean, there really wasn't. I mean, I'll recap what happened the rest of the match, but it kind of sort of fizzed out, especially as after halftime, and there wasn't really a ton of chances. 41st minute, Nigeria did have a good bit of sustained pressure in that they kind of had the ball around the Norwegian box. The Norwegian defenders were kind of scrambling a bit, and they ultimately, I think, this is the one where Ortega again just has a terrible cross and just hits it out. But I thought Nigeria had an okay shot at a penalty. You know, I could have seen this being called where the player, again, the Nigerian player is coming through and she tries to get a shot, and the Norwegian player very subtly clips her. And so I would have been okay with a penalty call here. I'm okay with it not being called as well, but Nigeria can feel a little bit aggrieved that more wasn't made of that because it's a different game. It goes into half 3-1. It's a very different outcome in the second half potentially. But then, you know, as the play kind of progresses, it ultimately gets worked wide to Ortega on the right side of the pitch, and Oshuala is wide open on the far post, left side of the pitch, and Ortega just doesn't hit a good cross. And this is just the theme of the day for Nigeria. They just got themselves into okay positions and then just didn't execute on crosses or final balls, and that's something, you know, disappointing. 45th minute, there was an incredible solo run by Graham Hansen. She beat a bunch of players and slipped it out to an attacker. It might have been Wrighton, and then Wrighton just gets cleared out by Ortega, who comes back and commits a hard foul. And, you know, ultimately the free kick doesn't amount to anything. But this is another one. You know, I touched on Graham Hansen, had a fantastic game. She was my most impressive player throughout because of her 1v1 ability. And then the other thing that she did really well is she knew when to release the ball. So there are a lot of players that are good at dribbling, but then they try to do too much. I thought what Graham Hansen did a great job of is beating players when she had to, passing the ball when she had to. Her decision-making was really good, and then her execution was obviously flawless as well. And so Norway goes into half 3-0 up, and that was pretty much the game. So second half, I noted that I was impressed with both Wrighton and Graham Hansen, but Graham Hansen especially. 50th minute, we had our first sub. Ayinde comes off. Uchendu comes on for Nigeria at center midfield. And right at the same time, Faith Michael has that really unfortunate collision with the goalkeeper. She had an unfortunate collision in the first half, but she ultimately was okay. This one, she was stretchered off. It looked like it was maybe her quad or somewhere on her leg that was really, really bothering her. And so hopefully, you know, she can recover and we wish her well, but Okeke came on. And then I wasn't exactly sure where Okeke was playing. She was at left center back some of the time, and then she was at right back. And so that was just something interesting that I wasn't quite sure what Nigeria was doing there. And I think ultimately Okeke finished the match at right back, but she was definitely kind of more left center back for a good stretch of that half. Nigeria was struggling to generate anything offensively when they weren't on the break or counter. So when Norway could get back, get in position, and kind of just have their shape right defensively, Nigeria really struggled to break them down. Nigeria's best chances came when there was a bit of chaos, when Norway was scrambling back after a counter or something like that. And, you know, I thought that Nigeria really struggled from that perspective. 57th minute, another short corner from Norway that Nigeria did not defend. I'm going to keep harping on this until then. Hello, Jeff and Matt. Thank you guys so much for being here. Just wanted to say hello because you guys are here interacting, and I appreciate you guys. 57th minute, again, this chance all comes about because Nigeria doesn't send the right amount of players to defend the short corner. And it didn't necessarily amount to a great chance. It created kind of a half chance. But again, you just think they would have learned at this point. Or other teams, if you happen to be watching this podcast or listening to this podcast or watching this video, study a little bit of short corners. Send the right amount of women out there to defend them. Graham Hansen, again, I cannot sing her praises enough. I mentioned again, she just had a fantastic run and through ball. Her 1v1 ability and even just, you know, beating players and making the right decisions was fantastic. 70th minute, Oshuola has a through ball. She rounds the keeper. And so this was Nigeria's best chance of the second half. So Oshuola has a fantastic opportunity. She's 1v1 on the keeper. The goalkeeper comes out. She's in no man's land, and she's just easily rounded by Oshuola. but Oshuola kind of has the ball slightly behind her body. And so instead of trying to kind of hit it from an odd, awkward angle, she tries to take another touch. And what happens then is she's cut down her angle completely. Norwegian players are getting back. They're cutting off the frame of the goal, and she ultimately puts her chance wide. I thought that Oshuola needed to take a touch and hit it first time if she was going to do it, because the goal was there. And that was unfortunately Nigeria's last real kind of major opportunity for a goal. 71st minute, Kanu comes on for Oparanozi, who didn't have the greatest game. Then I noted I thought Utland played really well for Norway at center forward. She was a great outlet for them. She was having good kind of traditional center forward play, back to goal, hold up play, relieving pressure, cycling the ball back, keeping possession. So I want to shout her out. 80th minute, Utland then comes off and Torsnes comes on at forward. No, not too much to note there, but just wanted to mention the players that got on. 84th minute, Risa comes off. Manum comes on at center midfield for Norway. And then the 91st minute, last sub is Javi comes on for Brighton at wing, or out left midfield, I guess I should say. Last thing I wanted to mention, Engen, the 21-year-old center midfielder for Norway, very composed in the center of the park. She had a fantastic game. And for a 21-year-old to just look that composed and everything, props to her for that. I thought that the final decisions and passes just let Nigeria down throughout the match. Ooh, deep breath. That is it. That is the preview for day 2. That's everything that happened. Quick recap, or I guess preview of tomorrow's matches. We have in Group C, we have Australia versus Italy at 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Then we have Brazil taking on Jamaica at 6:30 a.m. 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then England versus Scotland at noon Eastern Standard Time. I'm on the West Coast, so those sometimes I get math confused. Australia versus Italy is going to be an interesting matchup. I believe this is Italy's, well, it's not. It's Italy's first World Cup since 1999. Australia is generally a powerhouse. They have Sam Kerr. I think that's going to be a really interesting battle for, what is going to happen in Group C. If Australia wins rather easily, I think that, it's fairly evident that Brazil and Australia are going to come through. But if Italy really steps up and gives Australia a good game, that's going to make Group C very interesting, because the other match, Brazil versus Jamaica, Marta is not going to be playing for Brazil. They've already come out and said that. Marta, 33-year-old, one of the best players in the world. This is her 5th World Cup. If you follow women's soccer, you know who Marta is. Now, she is not going to be playing. I think she picked up either an ankle injury, some sort of injury, and she's being rested for this match. Jamaica is not the strongest opponent, so I think Brazil is just being overly cautious. But Brazil is on something like 9 losses in 10 matches. They are in a rotten run of form. They have not been playing well leading into this World Cup. And so, not that I expect Jamaica to get a win or even really get a result, but they can make things very nervy for Brazil. And if Jamaica gets a goal, or if they, if it's second half and it's still scoreless or tied, Brazil, that might be a worrying sign for Brazil. So that's something to look out for there. And then final game tomorrow. This is the game that you definitely want to watch. England versus Scotland. England, a women's powerhouse at this point. They are one of the favorites for the tournament. They're not in that upper echelon with the USA, France, and Germany, but they're right below that echelon. And so they should be incredibly strong at this tournament. And Scotland is one of those up-and-coming European countries who is really invested in the women's game. They are certainly no pushover, and the historical rivalry between England and Scotland makes every match between those two countries a ton of fun. So make sure to watch all of that. That is the end of this. Like I said before, if you are enjoying this, let me know. If you have suggestions on what you think I should do differently and all of that, and please let me know your thoughts at BT Soccer Pod. Follow us on Twitter at BT Soccer Pod. Send an email, bros.talking.soccer@gmail.com. We have a website, brostalkingsoccer.com. You can read about myself, my 2 brothers who usually are on this podcast with me, and you can check out some of our merch if you want to buy some of our merchandise. Already gave plugs for the sponsors. I'm trying to recap everything that I'm supposed to do here. We have a Slack channel if you want to join it. Hit us up again at btsoccerpod or bros.talking.soccer@gmail.com. We'll get you added there. You can chat with soccer fans all over the world about all kinds of topics, World Cup or otherwise soccer related. And I've been Dave Knittel. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll be back with another podcast tomorrow. So thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of your day. Go enjoy some sun, some hopefully good weather where you are, and tune in tomorrow. Thanks. Have a good one. See you, everybody.